started when I bought a book.
What kind of book?
A mysterious, illustrated one.
A city built from grammar and starlight.
Move, Majesty.
The desert winds favor patience. I will ride the horizon.
A knight to contest the minaret.
To dream of the forgotten realm of IKHU, the therapist, the king, and the unbeaten game. Episode 1, The Carpet with an Ocean in it. Close your eyes if you want, Dr. Mira Kadem says, a teacup wedged safely between her palms. But don't strain for symbols. Let the dream tell itself. So I begin where it began, though of course I'd like to say it began differently with method or consent. It began on College Avenue, near the falafel place that still misprints Mediterranean on its awning. I'd ridden my e-bike there to inhale tahini and salt before my meeting with the TAs. On the way back, the whole street hinged because of a carpet. He had spread it the way a person unrolls their memories to test the dye, long as a boat, sun-bleached rubies and pomegranate seeds held together by indigo, latitude after latitude of woven sky. Beside it, he'd arranged books, stacked fine ones in Arabic, Persian, and something I first mistook for Sindhi, then strewn a little comet's tail of cheap paperbacks. Westerns by Zane Grey, a coffee-stained Asimov, a brittle copy of Hyperion that crackled when you looked at it. The man himself, disheveled in a way that felt chosen, perhaps Iranian, perhaps Persian. My mind made those distinctions like a reflex. He looked up once. His eyes had the color of bookshelves at night. There was politeness in them, a private formality that made me want not to ask too many questions. Then the book that didn't so much sit among the others as lean in with a shoulder, as though it could not support its own listening. The cover had a pelmet of embossed script, and in its center a miniature of a city that unfurled like a peacock's tail around a hill. I did not recognize the writing. That was new. My hands are used to scripts the way raccoons are used to locks. I flipped it open. The illustrations reminded me of the old Arabian Nights I have in my office, the 19th century edition with hands the size of cottages and a style of blue that doesn't exist anymore. Here, a river threaded itself around terraces of lamps. Here, a king in a robe of chessboards looked down through a balcony cut with swans. Here was the image that caught me like a hook in the cheek. A dome opened from within, and inside it a spheroid board inked with meridians and rhymes, and on it figures moved. Rama, Krishna, Ganesha, Maya, names my discipline taught me to pronounce carefully, with as much reverence as consonants allow. The caption beneath, if that is what it was, said IKHU. Or so I read it. Later I would unread it 3 times over. I bought the book. I didn't ask the man what language it was or what country it belonged to or how much to pay. I used cash that felt like paper folded around breath. He wrapped the book in brown paper, then in a square of the carpet's fringe, and then he was simply sipping water from a plastic cup, the sun holding his wrist in its teeth. That night in my overstuffed armchair, I did what I do when I'm in love. I pretended it was just analysis. The text was a braid. The base script flowed like Nastaliq, all falling and rising, but with top stems like Devanagari matras. Some letters took the slant of Persian hand loves, others squared themselves into boxes. There were diacritics that behaved like breath marks, small puncta that glinted like vowels wanting to be birds. The syntax in the 2 lines of glosses I dared to make kept turning. Ergative alignments flared, then smoothed into nominatives. Postpositions became suffixes and back again in a kind of grammatical tide. I kept thinking Urdu, kept thinking Sanskrit, kept thinking Persian, and then it would be none of those, only the memory of their embraces. IKHU, I worried it like a lentil between finger and thumb. In Persian, Kuda, God. In Sanskrit, Dasa, servant. In some Indo-Aryan tongues, Ik for one. IKHU, one who is a servant of God? Or mischief, IKHU as what? The script itself elongated the syllables so that the word became a corridor you could walk down, walls covered in mirrors. Somewhere between the morphosyntactic notes and a thickness behind my eyes, the armchair became an arc, the book a small window full of foreheads, and I slept as a pebble sleeps inside a river, still and moved. In the dream, the carpet from College Avenue was already the ground. Its indigo bands were lanes leading to a city perched on a hill, shaped like the first letter of an alphabet I only half remembered. The air tasted of pomegranates and salt, as if the sea were hiding under the mountain, humming. There were towers, but they were nothing like minarets or shikaras or towers I knew. They were stacks of books bound by light, each volume a window onto a different square of the city. A woman leaned from one such window and poured syllables into the air. They fell, became birds, circled me once and flew toward the palace. I crossed a courtyard of chessboards mosaicked into the floor. But these boards were wrong in the way dreams are right. The squares were curved into arcs, and the whole of each board seemed to want to roll up into itself like a sleeping cat. "Welcome to IKHU," said a voice. The person who greeted me wore a scholar's shawl, but beneath it something like armor winked. She held a stylus of lapis in one hand and a conch shell in the other. "You look through words," she said, "so there is nothing for us to do but speak." "Speak," I echoed, because dream speech often requires allegiance. "First you will learn how to stand on our board," she said. "Then you will learn how to fall." "Am I here to play?" I asked. I was very brave, and also someone else's lungs were doing the breathing for me. "You are here because he is unbeaten," she said, pointing with the conch toward the inner palace where the domed pavilion sat, made of screens and silk and facets of mother-of-pearl. "And unbeaten things call forth repairers, which is one name for a challenger." "Unbeaten," I said, tasting the poison in the word. 777 days, she said with a smile that had both kindness and arithmetic in it. "If you count by days. And if we count differently?" She threw the lapis stylus, it arced and struck a pillar, and the pillar turned to water and back again. "If we count differently," she said, "the number is IKHU's. One and many and servant and God. Numbers can be words here. Words can be boards." She guided me into the pavilion. The dome overhead showed night in one half and day in the other, with a thin meridian like a tightrope between. The board beneath our feet was a sphere bisected by imagined lines. The equator, a poem, the longitudes slow hymns, the latitudes quick. If a usual chessboard is a declaration, I claim the world in squares. This one was a question: where is straight if the world is a circle? The pieces on the near rim slept as statues sleep in museums. An elephant with garlands made of numerals, a chariot with wheels like suns, a monkey whose tail was a question mark, a small boy with the universe in his mouth and butter on his face, a woman whose instrument was a river, a man blue as the evening, a woman black as the new moon. Names rose in me that were not mine to say, but came anyway. Ganesha, Rama, Hanuman, Krishna, Sarasvati, Kali. Maya passed like a scent of smoke. "Chaturanga," I said, and heard my dream give me the vowel it wanted. Chaturanga, not Chautaranga, as the book had spelled, or perhaps it had always spelled it so, and I had been the one to misread. "You know the ancestor," my guide said. "But our board was once a dome, and before that a net, and before that a story, so only ancestors could have ancestors." I began because it felt rude not to know a name. "Call me Śruti," she said. "It means that which is heard. Here I am written, but I remember being sound." We practiced standing. This is not the simple thing you imagine when you have a floor and 2 feet. On a spheroid board, you are always a degree away from falling. And falling was part of it. Śruti taught me to step along geodesics like someone learning to speak a case language after a lifetime of prepositions. "Straight," she said, "is as much a vow as a direction. Keep it, and the board keeps you." Around us, the court murmured, merchants of incense and mathematicians in robes, small boys with painted chessboards on their forearms, old women with reels of thread that looked like orbits. From the inner pavilion there came now and then the smallest sound, a piece set down with reverence, a soft exhalation, and then the world holding its breath. He was in there, the unbeaten one, and I was as foolish as all new challengers are. a man too proud of the languages he knows to notice he is already translating his own bones into someone else's script. But that knowledge belongs to hindsight, which is the tense in which one speaks to a therapist. In the dream, it was only the board, the dome, the smell of oils and ink, and Śruti's voice showing me where not to put my foot if I wanted to keep my stories intact. "Do I play today?" I asked. "Today is not a noun here," she said, "but yes." Episode 2, The Lessons in Being the Piece. "You're doing that thing with your hands," Dr. Kadem says, with what passes for a smile in someone trained to notice more than we wish. Her pen rests, not writing. "Indexing when you talk about direction. It matters," I say, where one points. In IKHU, the courtiers who ringed the king's pavilion agreed. You must be the piece before you may move it. The book had implied as much, but implication is a poor teacher for the body. I joined a circle of players beneath the dome. They were not, strictly speaking, courtiers. That word suggests officials and hush. They were an assemblage, astrologers with cracked fingernails, dancers with palms like petals, a night watchman who carried a lantern full of moths, a child with a wooden sword carved to look like a flute. "You are new," said the night watchman, peering at my hands as if they glowed. "Where did you learn to hold your breath that way?" "I'm a linguist," I said, absurd on its face, and he laughed as if I had just said I was a kind of bird. "We all think we know the grammar," he said. "Then the board conjugates us." We began with what I thought would be the simplest, the foot soldier, the padati. A poor man's idea of straightforward, one step, then another, along a geodesic curved by the world's pride in its own roundness. But when Śruti showed me how to stand inside the soldier, I learned about weight and about promises I had made at some point in graduate school and never kept. Each step forward as the padati was a breath taken away from some other version of me, one who wanted to run or flee or stand still. With each move, my calf muscles were scored by lines that felt like the plinths of statues. When I managed the small miracle of a promotion, a foot soldier walking the long Kala meridian and reaching the far rim, the transformation escalated me not into a queen, we have no such piece, but into a counselor, a mantri, a whisper with bone in it. The change felt like a new preposition entering the language of my joints. Then the elephant, Gaja. It was impossible not to think of the deity whose head makes most of our metaphors about obstacles. Ganesha did not move as the bishops do in Western chess, flinging themselves on neat diagonals. Gaja leapt 2 squares along a diagonal, jumping as if over an invisible river. It made the movement feel ceremonial, boundaried. When Śruti placed her palm on my shoulder and told me to be the elephant, no, not be. But remember, my right collarbone went heavy with garlands, and my head filled with carillon. The first time I misstepped, thinking like a bishop and not like a Gaja, I felt an impact, not bruising the way waking life does, but ringing, like the time I opened a cupboard into my own face and tasted iron for an hour. I put my hand to my head, and it found there the memory of a trunk, and my nostrils flared as if to smell out the source of my error. "You misread the meter," Śruti said. "This poem moves in leaps of 2. "Poem," I repeated. "Of course," she said. "Don't you see the prosody drawn along the lines?" I did not, but then I did. On every meridian of the board, on every latitude, patterns of short and long shone like beads in prayer. We were moving, in other words, not only through space configured into a sphere, but through verse. When I embodied the horse, Ashva, I learned another meter, the leap that ignores what it leaps over, the way a child can run across elders' arguments without disturbing the tea. As Ashva, I stored energy in my thighs and let it release, and the topography underfoot rearranged itself to honor that permission. As Rama in his chariot, Ratha, I felt the straightness of the straight line as a vow. To be true, a geodesic requires a prayer underneath it. As Sarasvati in her counsel, Mantri, I felt words take weight, not as nouns, but as the small levers by which one rotates a sphere. There were losses. Losses instruct in a way no gloss is willing to admit. In my first game with the night watchman, I tried to pin his chariot between my elephant and my mantri, forgetting that a board that curves will shame the Euclidean assumptions out of you. I saw the floor as I moved, but the seeing was not relinquishment. It was a bell greater than hearing. When his ratha cut through, something in me gave, and I felt it not as pain precisely, but as the sudden silence in a house when a refrigerator clicks off. "You hear it only when it stops," said the watchman kind. The court gathered around games and around the pain. They patted my arm, they wrapped my ankle with cloth, they offered a cup of something tart that felt like pomegranate retired to the life of a doctor. "You will want to turn away from being the piece after it is cut down," Śruti warned. "That is when you must be it most fully. Remain. Learn the name of the blow." I remained. I learned. I learned the names it wanted me to have. I found that when I moved as Krishna, a piece that did not exist in any rulebook I knew, and yet the night watchman swore it was a known variant of Chaturanga in a place that had never survived a map, the board became humor. Krishna did not move so much as ask other pieces to move, as if they had thought of it themselves. I was both delighted and slightly appalled. Then I played Kali by accident. Do we ever play her by design? And in hitting and cutting through, I felt an old anger of mine reach its arms through from Berkeley and take something it thought it was owed. "I have not been angry," I told Śruti at a rest. "Not with yourself," she said. "And with whom?" I asked, like any boy. "The ones you mistake for kings," she said, and then she looked at the inner pavilion, and we both said nothing. Maya haunted the periphery. If Krishna was humor, Maya was theater. Maya's move, it turned out, was to bend the board itself so that what was straight seemed curved, and what was curved could masquerade as a good idea. She was not a pawn, nor a counselor, nor a noble piece. She was the rule's show and tell. "Do not touch her unless you are ready to have your naming hand renamed," Śruti cautioned. "Even here she plays for keeps." Between games we ate things that did not exist outside the dream. Dates whose pits hummed when you set them on wood. Bread baked with letters so when you tore it, you had to choose between vowels. Someone brought me a honeycomb, and when I put it to my tongue, I understood why in some languages sweetness and knowledge are the same word. At night, if night is when the dome felt moon-heavy, Śruti taught me what she called the Akshara Vyuha, the letters battle array. She drew the script I had seen in the book across my palms, a letter on each ridge like a line of fate. "If you cannot pronounce it," she said, "you cannot move it. If you cannot move it, do not dare to be it. Pronouncing is moving. Pronounce I did. I shaped my mouth like a child being told to imitate an uncle. I hiccuped on a retroflex flap and then let it swim through me as though memory had grown gills. I played the horizon like a monochord. I whispered the names of divine pieces I am not worthy to name in waking speech, and felt them make in me a sufficiency that had nothing to do with arrogance. "You are learning how to stand in what you revere," Śruti said as a final benediction. "The king will expect this." Only once did I ask, "And if I win?" "You do not win against," she said, "not here. You win into." "Into what?" She drew a circle on the floor that looked like the simplest thing, a circle you could have drawn on the fogged window of a campus office with your finger. "Into the thing in which winning and losing are siblings. That," I said, "is not a rule. It is what rules remember when they've forgotten themselves," she said. And somewhere in the pavilion the smallest bell sounded as if reminding the air that it had lungs. The next day, the next now, I woke inside the dream with a body that had learned a handful of forms and the memory of being both struck and forgiven. Śruti took my wrist as if reading my pulse were a kind of literacy and brought me to the silk screens, whose geometry the artisans called C's. The man behind them, the Unbeaten, laughed like a man at a wedding, not because something was funny, but because joy had moved into his house and put its feet on his furniture. "Let him in," he said, and it felt less like an invitation and more like syntax, letting a new tense in. I went. How else do you earn your therapist's time? By going in where you are afraid. Episode 3, The Unbeaten Grammar. "I want to say two things," Dr. Karim says when I pause to drink from the sweating glass she keeps for such times. 1. You are narrating from inside your body. Good. 2. Be careful. It is easy to act as if we are visitors to our dreams. That's a lie we tell to make waking polite. Is there a third thing? She looks at the little bronze elephant on her shelf and at the carpet I've only lately noticed resembles the one on College Avenue, if you allowed a weaver 7 more months to complicate it. Third, I have a feeling, she says, and does not say it yet. The king of IKHU was not one person until he was. He was first a geometry, the way the light used him like a hinge, the way the pavilion's silk leaned in his direction. He was a scent the courtiers wore as if loyalty was sandalwood. He was several ages at once, old enough to be my father in a suit at a graduation, young enough to be the boy who broke my front tooth with a baseball bat in 7th grade, and we are still friends. When he finally resolved into a being, he wore white with a border of black and red on the hem, the way many kings do when the day is both festival and battle. I know you, he said, which is, you must agree, an economical insult. Not yet, I said, and bowed as if my spine remembered something my mouth did not. We sat opposite each other, which is to say we held the poles of the world between us, because the board was a sphere and we were the geography that allowed it to exist. On my rim slept my chosen avatars. Ganesha at the elephant squares, Rama where the chariot nested, Hanuman with his tail curled like an interrogative, Sarasvati quiet as ink in a well, Krishna humming under his breath, Maya standing a step to the side of where the map claimed she should be. On his rim, Shiva with ash on his skin and a calm like gravity, Lakshmi's coins whose fall sounded like seeds, Parashurama, whose axe wanted history to walk in a straighter line. There were the foot soldiers, of course, 8 on a rim that made 8 look like a compromise between small and vast. We will play the chaturanga as told by the storytellers, the king said. The moves are as you learned them with this edition. Each move has a taste. A taste? I managed not to make it sound like an accusation. Lime, pomegranate, smoke, iron, milk, ink. He ticked them off like a mother with children around a spice tray. Once you taste smoke, for instance, you will know that you have moved as though the mountain had already burned. Taste can correct you, if you let it. Taste corrects you is, for the record, a better motto for tenure than the one the committee gives you. I moved a foot soldier as a courtesy, as I had been taught on boards that pretended to be planes. The geodesic carried him not directly forward, but up and along, and as he went, I tasted iron. You promised him a wound, the king said, mild. He moved your corresponding soldier with a motion like someone closing a book. Milk. I tasted milk and felt a kindness that had nothing to do with being spared. We played. No, we were played. And if I say that as passively as a child reciting an ablative absolute, forgive me, I have not found the English for what happens when a move and a mover braid. When I moved my elephant and miscounted the leap, I tasted smoke before the strike. That was Maya's laughter on my tongue. When I moved Hanuman and felt the board ignore everything, he leapt over with a courtesy that bordered on cruelty. I tasted lime. I tasted a high, bright thing that said your reach does not entitle you to story. When I moved Krishna, asking my mantri to move of her own accord and watching as she did and didn't and did, I tasted pomegranate, sweet, seeded with what no teeth can devour. When I moved Rama straight as a prayer, I tasted ink, as though my body were a library, and this strike shelved a book. Do you see? The king asked after an hour or a century, whichever measures possibility better. What do you taste when I move? I asked back, because no one wants to be the only one full of flavors he cannot digest. Mostly smoke, he said kindly. I'll learn, I said, and he laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not a generous one. Something else. Recognition, perhaps, which is a form of shared appetite. Halfway, the board had no halfway is confession, I made a mistake. I thought I could hold his Shiva with my Ganesha, pin him between iron and garland. But mistake is too soft a word. I moved for my own cleverness, which is how men lose what they love. The blow came, and I let it. Not stoically, I am no hero. Tears ran in me the way a river runs underground, quietly, certain it will be heard elsewhere. iron on my tongue, thick as a nail, a sensation in the chest like being told in public that you have pronounced a word so wrongly you have invoked its opposite. I felt what Śruti meant. Do not withdraw from the peace when it is dying. Stand in it. Let it bruise you with its truth. I stood. The elephant turned his head to look at me, slow, kind as a mountain forgiving a climber. You were using my head to decorate your plan, he said, and then he was not there, and my rim had a gap in it where something once bright and heavy had lived. I do not remember the moves that followed, only the tastes: lime, milk, lime, ink, smoke, a mouth that could not decide between laughing and bleeding. From the corner of my vision, the Maya piece watched with something like sympathy. When I finally, out of desperation or genius, these are cousins, moved her, the dome changed. The equator bent briefly around a word I once used unthinkingly in a seminar and then regretted for days. The meridians rearranged themselves so that what had been his straight line became a curve bold as a lie written in a child's diary. "You would do this?" the king said, amused without contempt. "What is her move called?" I asked, half in awe and half in the fear a child feels when showing his parent he has learned a curse. "If you must," he said. "She is the principle that comes to the aid of the proud. This is why we respect and avoid her." The strike that followed was my own doing and also inevitable. The board, now that Maya had touched it, took a flavor of smoke that no water would remove. I felt a blow in the gut that belonged to a time my father, working on Saturdays so that I would be first generation in one country and second in another, scolded me for confusing gratitude with obedience. That blow knocked the past from its shelf and left the present to catch it. "Again," the king said softly, and at once it was another move. I wanted to tell him that I had misunderstood unbeaten. I had assumed it meant unbeaten by others. Here it seemed to mean willing to be beaten by what in him asks for no one's praise. I wanted to ask him if he was my father. I wanted to ask him if he was me, age-laundered. I wanted to ask if he was the bookseller on College Avenue after an extra decade of weather had his way with him. But you do not ask a king his etymology, not if you want to keep your nouns. Instead, I played, and I learned that when you taste milk, it is not always kindness. Sometimes it is infancy returning with an invoice, and that when you taste ink, you are about to write a sentence that will cost you your sleep, and that when you taste pomegranate, the battlefield is a garden wearing chainmail, and that when you taste smoke, you should put your tongue on the roof of your mouth, like a boy trying not to ask the worst question. What if I am the one who will keep him unbeaten? We came to it as all games come to their untranslatable end, not by checkmate, but by a shift in the air. The dome leaned, the silk screens breathed like the gills of a fish suddenly on land. My Krishna had drawn his friendliest smile. His Shiva had set a foot on a geodesic that would take him to me in 3 moves, unless I asked Maya to lie on my behalf so that lying would become statute. The foot soldiers, mine and his, had found in each other a recognition that is the true terrifying thing. We are not enemies. We are instruction in a grammar neither of us invented. "You may use her again," he said, a hand half lifted toward Maya, not as permission, but as a test. "No," I said, and it was the truest thing I had said to a man in white with a border of black and red. "Then you will lose," he said, as gently as any surgeon. "Then I can stop calling it losing," I said, and tasted not ink or milk or lime or smoke, but something I do not have a name for in any tongue I have learned. Something like the moment a poem realizes it is longer than the page. He leaned back. He put his palm on the board. The dome rang once like a glass kissed by a finger. "Bring him the bowl," he told the night watchman, who had never left us and had become, in my mind, the person you call when the floor and the roof confuse each other. The bowl was a small thing made of the same material as promises. It held water that carried a reflection that was not mine. I looked. I saw the bookseller from College Avenue, except he was wearing the pavilion and the king and the night watchman on his skin like tattoos. I saw the script in the book as not merely a script, but as the skeleton of a body I live in when I'm not in Berkeley, which is more often than salary suggests. I saw the carpet I had bought the book from expand, become a coastline, then a country. A word rose from the water, IKHU. It broke apart, IKHU, das, one, God, servant. Which am I? I asked. I was so tired I could be that honest. He smiled. Yes, he said, and I could have ended there. Games end everywhere that there is a mouth. The dome would have been satisfied, the city would have resumed its humming. Śruti would have taken me to eat a bread whose vowels I could afford. But I am a modern man, I need twists. The board obliged. The move that undid me was mine, of course. It always is. I moved Sarasvati, my counselor, in her small diagonal, thinking to cover a gap. I miscounted how curvature takes away your arithmetic and replaces it with singing. The blow came from his Lakshmi, which in this variant could move 2 squares along a geodesic if there had been a gift given on the previous turn, which there had, because the milk I had tasted had been kindness, even if it had asked for my dignity. I tasted coins falling. They fell through the floor of my mouth and landed somewhere in my ribcage. Sarasvati whispered in my ear as she left the board, "You were trying to be clever with counsel. Advice is a covering. I am a river." "Again," he said to me, and this time it was less game than grammar. "Repeat until the form repeats you." I repeated. I lost, I learned. Somewhere in those losses I understood that being unbeaten was not about tallying but about refusing the cheap fix. I refused Maya 3 times and felt the board straighten reluctantly, like hair after humidity. The last time I refused her, she looked at me with such hurt that I almost relented, which would have been what boys call love. I did not. She nodded once, then did not disappear. Maya never disappears, but stepped aside so far inside the rule that the rule remembered its own parentage. The king took his hand from the board. The dome exhaled. The silk stirred. "You have not beaten me," he said. "I have not beaten anyone," I said. "And yet," he said, and he bowed to me, not to mock, not to inflate, but because something had changed, and he was now included in the something. "And yet," I said, and saw in his face the bookseller, or rather I saw in both faces, bookman and king, a third, mine, older, and with a beard I cannot grow. This is where you ask the twist. I was not ready. My mouth tasted of nothing a man can eat. Then came episode 4. Episode 4, the rule that refused me. "You promised me a twist," I say to Dr. Kadem. It is not fair to put it the way a student puts the rubric on the table, but I know no other way to say, "Help me reach the part where knowing goes quiet." "I didn't ask for one," she says, and her voice has the neutral temperature of river stones. "But you are not wrong to expect your psyche to outplay your ego." Svi there. The morning after not beating the king, if you can have mornings in a place where day and night share custody, I went walking in the city. It was a mandala of streets and a grammar of smells. Children drew boards in chalk and then rolled them up, laughing, while grandmothers pretended not to notice. A man with a flute brought his fingers to his mouth and produced not sound but letters that hovered like mayflies. Śruti walked with me the way memories walk ahead and then behind and then through. "What do your students call you?" she asked me. "Professor," I said, as the truth requires. "What does your father call you?" she asked, and my mouth answered before I could edit it. "Son," I said, when he is proud. "Boy when he is angry. Doctor when he wants to borrow the prestige to pay the rent." "What does your king call you?" she said, and I did not have an answer because we had not named each other beyond the grammar of the board. We came to the market. A man sat at the far side, and the carpet on which he sat was the one from College Avenue, except it had learned the city by heart. He looked up. He had the king's smile and the bookseller's eyes and my voice saying, we are late, which I have always said even when we are not. He held the book I had bought from him. He opened it, and where there had been pictures now there were blank pages, white as teeth. "You sold me this," I said. "I sold you the covers," he said. "The inside is yours." I put my hand on the first page. A word rose, not ink, not pencil. It was pressure, the kind that syllables exert when they want to exist. IKHU. It did not break into parts this time. It held. I looked at the bookseller. He was my age when I was 10 years older. He looked like a future I had been saving for retirement and now could not afford. "What is this place?" I asked, which was one way of asking, "Whose am I?" He gestured with 2 fingers the way men of my father's generation do when they want to show instead of tell. The city lifted its chin. The dome bent and rose. The board underneath us revealed itself. Spheroid, yes, and more. It was not a sphere alone. It was a sphere nested in a sphere, onion-like, jewel-like, like the 1,000-petaled promises in religious art that men who looked like me commodify into tattoos. Each shell bore its own lines of latitude and rhyme, its own rules bending toward and away from the possibility of fable. "You played here," he said, "but mostly you were played. What you call the king is something we call the unbeaten grammar. What you call Maya is something we call a teacher who knows how to stage an intervention. You have a word for this in your work, don't you? When something appears across all languages." "An archetype," I said, and felt my therapist's graduate studies in my mouth like a borrowed cloak. "Good. Perhaps the game is what the archetype does when given a board," he said. "Perhaps the board is what the archetype uses when it is tired of being a guest in your house and wants to cook with your pans." "I want this to be about my father," I said, "because even in dreams, men want to bring their fathers to the podium." "It is," he said, "and it is not. That's because your father is not the king, nor are you, nor am I." He closed the book gently, as one closes a sleeping child's fingers around a toy. Śruti put her finger on my wrist as if she could count the arguments hiding in my pulse. "You should go back and play one more," she said. "I already lost," I said, tired. "One more," she repeated, and I understood that refusals are sometimes the last trap the board lays for us. Back beneath the dome, before the court arrived, before the night watchman lit his lamp of moths, I stepped onto the sphere alone. The pieces took their places as if called by a prayer that had waited more patiently than I think I am capable of. The king came, slower than before, as if letting the board introduce me instead of taking on the job of hospitality himself. "Again?" he said. "Again," I said, and then I did the thing that was not allowed. I became Maya. Not moved her, not asked her to lie on my behalf. I wore her the way a piece of grammar can possess a sentence, the way a melody can enter a child and come out the other end as dancing. Inside her I felt the terrible kindness of bending truth so that something survives what would otherwise end it. Inside her I felt the temptation to own what is only mine to use. Inside her I felt the board leaning out of its axis to accommodate my arrogance. I refused to move. Not as a tactic, as a vow. The dome shuddered, the meridians glowed. The king's hand, which had been reaching for his foot soldier, froze. Taste flooded me, milk, lime, smoke, ink, pomegranate, iron, then none. Then the absence of taste, then the sensation that taste had never existed, and I had been making it up to excuse hurting people with metaphors. "You can't," the night watchman whispered. He had appeared without appearing, as those who watch the boundary do. "If Maya does not move, the board cannot correct for curvature. Straight becomes too straight. Someone will fall off." "Then let someone fall," I said, and heard in my voice the anger that had pretended to be scholarship for 8 years. The king looked at me with the exact attention a parent gives a child learning the shape of number. "This is not victory," he said. "This is speechlessness. I have been fluent too long," I said, "in moving the world to save my plans. Let it stand without me bending it. Let me lose. But let me lose to what is straight." For a long while, nothing happened. Under my feet, the board hummed like a drum at a battlefield, waiting for the dance to begin. My refusal thickened the air. Maya, inside me, did not sulk. She grieved the way teachers grieve when students discover the lesson requires they abandon the teacher. When it happened, it was very simple. The king put his hand on the Rama piece, the chariot, and then took it away. He did not move. He echoed my refusal, and the refusal ran like water along every line of the board, then every shell of the onion, then every sphere nested in that mandala of globes. I felt the entire city listen for a move that would not come. Silence became the rule. I had invented nothing. I had remembered a possibility that rules hide when they're afraid of losing their jobs. Stillness. In the stillness, the game showed me something that felt like being stared at by a reflection I had taken for a window for years. The carpet from College Avenue unfurled beneath us. The dome opened. The shells of the multisphere unlatched as flowers do when they want to impress bees. The courtiers were not courtiers. They were my students, TAs, my colleagues, my father, the bookseller, and Dr. Kadem, all as avatars in a story that had given our faces to older names. Śruti was a page from my dissertation that I had written and then deleted because it was too beautiful, and beauty is suspect in academic prose. The king was not my father, he was not me, he was not the bookseller. He was the part of language that refuses to lie even when lying would save a country. He was the assertion that some moves are not ours to make. The twist came on a quieter frequency. The night watchman brought the bowl again. I looked into it the way one looks into a puddle at dusk. A page of the book surfaced. On it was my handwriting. I do not mean it resembled my handwriting. It was mine, down to the way I form my S like a tide going out. I read the words. They were the opening of the story I had told you when I walked in here an hour ago, and also the ending I have not yet earned. The Accidental Novel, my hand had titled it. And beneath, as he were looking through the pages, a grammatical lapse I never commit in my published work, but allow myself in notes. My voice, not just on the line, but in it. I flipped another page. It was this dream, written as if dreamed yesterday and tomorrow, second person, first, third. I flipped another, a therapy session, this very one, with a bronze elephant on the shelf and a carpet underfoot, and you, Dr. Kadem, your pen poised but not writing, the way you do when you are listening with something older than ears. I felt the shock you can only feel when the frame is the thing you've been framing. The book I bought on College Avenue contained the story of buying it and of being here telling you about it. Recursive artifacts often use markets, the king said, as if commenting on weather. You wrote it, I said, looking at the bookseller who was also me and not. I carried it, he said. You wrote it. She bound it. He nodded toward Śruti. And you read it? I asked the king, embarrassing myself because the answer was an ocean. Always, he said. Then why Unbeaten? Why play if the book has already been written? I said, because men of my training always try to impress inevitability with clever questions. Because reading is not the same as winning, he said. Because unbeaten is what happens when rule and mercy kiss and neither eats the other. I looked again at the page. The handwriting belonged to me, but the way the words moved inside their lines belonged to another grammar, not Berkeley's. I had not just dreamed. I had authored it, then bought it, then brought it to you to verify that I was not inventing myself whole cloth. I turned one more page. In the margins were notes not mine. They were your notes, Dr. Kadem. The handwriting was rounder earlier in the morning. The words were in Persian with Devanagari matras above. A braid, the script from the book. Transference as avataric embodiment you had written. Maya equals therapeutic frame. Refusal to move equals analytic silence equals royal consent to let psyche speak. I looked up at you in the dream and at you in this office now, and I could not tell which you had written those notes, which you had bound the book, which you had put it into the hands of the man on College Avenue who may have been your father. I finally found words small enough for the revelation. You've been here before. Your mouth did something soft and unafraid. My grandmother played the king until she died, you said in the dream, and now in the room. She sold the book to me, and to you, and to herself. She was Iranian by nation, Indian by childhood, American by salary, and IKHU by vocation. IKHU, I said, the suffix arriving like a boat I had been waiting for, one who belongs to IKHU. I have been waiting for you to realize the rule that refuses you, you said, so that we can begin. Begin? I said, disarmed. Therapy, you said, as if we had not begun already and as if what we had been doing was the prelude. It starts when the board stops. I wanted to argue. Men of my kind always want to earn the beginning after the beginning has already welcomed them. Instead, I did the only move left. No move. I sat with you. The room was the dome. The dome was the room. The carpet was your carpet. It was the markets. It was the earth. The bronze elephant was Gaja. The teacup steamed. The steam wrote a word on the air, and then we did not read it. And the king? I asked quietly, not eager to restart the game, but wanting not to be rude to a grammar that had given me such fruit. He is unbeaten, you said. Because? I asked. Because he never plays alone, you said. Because every time someone refuses to move Maya, the board remembers it has another dimension. What dimension? I asked, my eyes greedy again. You're in it, you said. It's called I cannot tell whether I am awake or dreaming because both tell the truth. The twist I promised you is not clever, not dramatic. It is this. When I left your office that day, sunlight slanting on College Avenue, students in sandals quoting Proust incorrectly, I looked for the bookseller. Of course I did. The plaza where he had sat was empty. The falafel place's awning had corrected its spelling. A Zane Grey novel lay under a bench, rain-warped, pages swollen like a throat. I picked it up. Inside the back cover there was a rectangle of glue where a library card used to be. At the top, stamped in purple ink, a name, Kadem Community Library, a date older than I am. At the bottom, a handwritten note in a script that braided Persian and Devanagari the way that book did, for the one who forgets not to move. I stood in the street and laughed the way a newly beaten man laughs when he realizes the board is bigger than his losing, and that, therefore, his losing has been repurposed into grammar. I went back to my office. I opened a blank document. I wrote, "The accidental novel." Then, without meaning to, I wrote the first page in your handwriting. This is the part I have not told you until now, because it is tender as gums. I do not know if I authored these episodes or if I am only one of the avatars that made the book readable this time through. I don't know if the man I bought the book from was your father. I don't know if I have met him yet or if I become him when I am old. I do know that IKHU does not break, that sometimes a word is a city and sometimes a city is a rule, and sometimes a rule is a mercy. I know that I refuse to move Maya when I'm tempted to bend the world to make a point I could instead let arrive as a guest. As for the undefeated king, this morning on the way here I stopped on campus to watch a student chalk a board on the steps, curving squares over a stair's lip. She drew gently, left her box of chalks like an offering, and walked away. As I approached, a gust came. The chalk blurred. For a breath or two, the board remembered being a sphere. It was enough to taste pomegranate. It was enough to think, we have begun. You told me once, you say now, that you hated games. I hate losing, I say. And now? You ask. I look at your carpet, at the bronze elephant, at the book not on the table because there is no book there but a bowl with water, and in that water the ceiling, and on the ceilinged water the shadows of two people, and in one shadow the outline of a crown neither of us is wearing. I say what men do not allow themselves to say when they are guarding a reputation they cannot eat. I'm curious. It will be enough, you say. Outside, College Avenue remembers it has been a caravan route and a page margin and a river and a carpet's border. Inside, we sit and do not move. The rule that refused me holds. The unbeaten grammar does not tally. Later, I will ride my e-bike, anachronistic and necessary, back to the falafel place to chew tahini and iron and ink. If the bookseller is there, I will ask him the price and he will name me a number and I will pay him with breath. When I dream again, I have already. The board will be there. When I don't dream, I have already. The board will be here. In both, I will abstain from the correction that protects my cleverness. I will let straight be as holy as it is dangerous. And in the silence that follows, in the analytic stillness that tastes of milk and pomegranate and smoke in such precise proportions that taste learns it is older than tongue, I will do what I came here to do, not to beat him, not to be beaten, but to join what does not mind being unbeaten because it has no interest in winning. You nod. You do not write. The pen waits as if this were the page. The twist sits very quietly, the way profound things will, the realization that the therapist has been the king all along, not because she wields authority, but because she keeps stillness in the room and refuses Maya on our behalf. And the realization, just as quickly corrected by a grammar that will not flatter me, that she is not the king, that no one is. That the king is the function that emerges when two people and a story agree not to bend what does not want bending. Later, long after the session ends and the hand does what it does with doorknobs, I will find, caught in the rubber gasket of my washing machine, foreign as a coin from a past life, a small rectangle of paper wrinkled by water. It will be from the back of a Zane Grey, stamped Kadem Community Library. In the corner, someone has scrawled a number in pencil, 64. I will flip it over. On the reverse, in my own hand, and in a script not quite any I can teach, a single word, IKHU. I will laugh again. I will not move. The board will curve around the shape of my refusal like grammar around mercy, and somewhere a king will bow, and somewhere a boy with a chessboard on his forearm will run across a courtyard and leap as a horse does, because straight is a vow, and the equator a poem, and the dome made of every page we think we wrote. We sit here a moment longer, you and I, not moving a single piece. Then you lift your eyes from a page you never turned and say, with the precise kindness of one who knows other dimensions by first name, "Tell me about your father." And we begin again, unbeaten by anything except the need to be the ones who speak. End of 4 episodes for now.